Hello, everyone. This is Bridget Danner, and I'm going live today with Shalin Dominique, who is a new friend I met at the Cell Core Detox Conference, which was really cool. And we have a lot in common. We both know a lot about mold, have been through mold. And Shalene does something that I don't, which is specializes in weight loss, which is a big topic for people. Frustrating topic for people, right, Shalene?
Yes, it is. It's like definitely a growing topic. Like what I specialize in is in particular mystery weight gain. So when people are doing all the right things, they're eating right, they're moving well, they know about nutrition, but the weight will just not come off. It just the scales does not budge with the lifestyle at all. And it sometimes can come either like like similar in my case, like with a very rapid onset, weight comes off very quick, like I gained 44 pounds in 6 weeks. But for other cases, it's also like it slowly accumulates month after month, year after year, and people just think, okay, it's part of aging, but it stays resistant to any diet or exercise, and that makes it, which typically make the weight loss much more calculable, right?
That's really interesting. Yeah, I love that you say, when nothing else is working. Like I use that same phrase, except I say about toxins. I'm like, if you're trying everything, then look at if it could be toxins. So it's similar. And I was looking at your website earlier, which I'll share here later. But it looks like you do see a lot of toxicity as a cause for weight. So can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so first of all, we also have to say like toxicity is growing, right? The average American is exposed to 200,000 toxins daily. And very interesting, just in time. So when we met at the Eco, like I was perfectly healthy, right? But I moved into a new apartment and I am also like, at the moment exposed to mold again. So toxins are just in particular in the United States, I found everywhere. We really have to make a very conscious effort to not be exposed to these toxins. And so many people, because we don't learn about it, right? For us, it's our profession. We are living and breathing functional medicine, but so many people like just are not aware that they're going exposed on an ongoing basis to these toxins, to these pathogens. And then it sometimes seems like overnight they are getting chronically ill, right? But it has not been overnight. Like these toxins, they build up in the body and it's just like a tipping point. I always explain my clients, we basically all have a toxin bucket and it's getting filled and it's getting filled and getting filled. And the body can still handle it because we have these detox pathways. But then all of a sudden there's a breaking point. And when as soon as the toxic bucket overflows, that's when all of a sudden a lot of symptoms, there's a sudden onset on symptoms. And that's basically when they feel like they gotten hit with a chronic illness overnight.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, my own story, and I'd love to hear more about yours. Like, I think the diet, like improving my diet and lifestyle helped like to a point. Like I was like treading water, but I didn't know I was living in a moldy home. So it was like I couldn't ever quite, succeed. And then just like you said, it's like the body just gets to a point where it's like we
Yeah.
can't do this anymore. We can't even tread anymore. So it's so interesting to me that that also applies to this question of weight. So maybe could you explain a little bit more like what weight gain is in a sense, like what the body is doing when you're gaining weight, like for no reason?
Yeah, so toxicity, right? When the body has more toxins in the body that it cannot eliminate, then it just stores them in fat cells. And it's always a good thing. I always say, like, our bodies are smart. They're not doing something to harm us. They're putting this into the fat cells because they don't want to like damage any surrounding organs and tissues. And then excess toxicity leads to inflammation. And when we have this inflammation cascade going on, like the body just also holds onto calories, right? Because cortisol gets spiked. So toxins are definitely a main root cause for weight gain. What's also happening when we have a lot of toxicity in the body, we know we all are exposed to pathogens, right? We all have parasites, viruses, bacteria in the body. And so many of my clients, they often ask me, where do now all of a sudden these parasites come from? I feel like everyone has parasitic infections, but parasites are also a toxin issue. Like I mentioned before, like we all have parasites, but what they are doing when we are exposed to this excess toxicity, let's say we are exposed to mold, then they do something that's called pleomorphism, and they develop from a harmless into a harmful culture. They feed off a lot of toxins. For example, parasites eat heavy metals, and then I feel just the immune system gets chronically lowered, and the body just becomes for a magnet, like for all this junk, and the junk gets stored in the fat cells.
Okay. So Paul has a question here. He's cutting to the chase, which is always good. So how do you get toxins out of fat cells?
With the specific binders, and there we also have to be like very conscious around binders, because a lot of people, they take charcoal, zeolite, colloidal silver, and it can work to a point, but we also have to keep in mind that a lot of these binders, they first of all, they only work in the gut, but so many toxins, like let's take mold as an example again, they are all over the body, right? They can cross the blood-brain barrier. Parasites, for example, their liver flukes, they're in the gallbladder, every place. So we have to be very strategic with kind of binders we use, because they need to be working systemically on the body. For example, if we don't detoxify the whole body like systematically, we just get reinfected again and again.
Mm. Well, yeah, I want to talk about your whole approach, but like, are there certain binders that you find go more to, outside of the gut that you like?
Yeah, I think similar to you, because we both have attended eco. We both use Starcore binders. They are just systemic in the body. They have a lot of different binders which work for different toxins, different pathogens. And I just feel always we need to start with a full body assessment when we work with a client, because this is also like a very common cause where people do not get better. It's never just one root cause, right? I have never had
Yeah.
one single client coming to my door to say, Shalin, help me, and we run the testing and there's just one thing. And this is what people typically make a mistake. They go just after the mold, they just go after the parasites, they just go after the Lyme, but there really needs always in place to be a full body assessment. And then you know this as well, we need to strategically detoxify them. We cannot just go after the mold in the beginning or just after the Lyme, because Lyme, for example, parasites, for example, hold both mold and Lyme bacteria in their body. So if we don't address them in the beginning, there again, the detoxification happens over and over.
Yeah, so if if you're not as familiar with my work or Shalene's work, this might be blowing your mind a little bit, that we all have parasites and we all have toxins, and there's an order of detox. You may not have even heard of binders, which basically like chemically or structurally help kind of pull toxins out to be detoxified. So, yeah, I mean, you're right too. Like you and I, like this is our everyday knowledge, right? But most people don't have this knowledge about toxins and parasites and all that. So I wonder if people coming to you because you specialize in this mystery weight gain. Are they more educated? Are they kind of halfway down this path, or who do you get?
It's 50-50. So some people, they are really, most of them are really very aware of their diet and exercise. I have a lot of clients, they even eat better, they have better lifestyle approaches in place, but still when we run their total tox burn, which is a test where we can just screen for toxicity, they are mind blown what all still they are exposed to. So they have a certain degree of awareness about these things, but once we really have this deep dive into the body and see, look, this is this and this and this is what you're exposed to, and this is causing these downstream effects, they are very mind blown.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I see us too. I think that test is that from Vibrant. That test.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, we just added that to our shop, and I want to run it on myself because it's true that like even when you're living a healthy lifestyle, some of these numbers will be really high, and it's just
Mhm.
the exposure, and then our bodies are all different on our detox capacity. So yeah, I'm definitely interested to get to know that test more. So I know I had a question on Instagram about like your approach and your services. So now we know like some people come to you a little bit more knowledgeable than others. I'm curious your process and also kind of like the patterns you tend to find. Like are there any, or is it all unique to the person?
So the approach is definitely always like very thorough testing, because I feel like, yeah, I have an in-depth look at the symptoms in the beginning before I ever sit down with a client of mine. I also reviewed 8 pages of their health history. I look at the symptoms and can basically get already a good understanding what's going on in the body. But then we definitely also want to follow up with some testing to just see how high are the numbers, right? Because the symptoms don't tell us that. And then basically we want to
Mm.
follow step by step a full body detoxification, but also some changes in lifestyle, some education, because I feel like this is very often missing, right? If we just pull the toxins out of the body, but we don't educate where did they come from, what can you do in life, what are your weak drainage pathways, then the person might get just like back to square one a year or 2 years later down the road.
Mm. Yeah, I like your point about the testing is helpful, and I think too like these can be usually a long-term healing journey. So if you
Yeah.
don't have some testing to know like oh yeah, those numbers were high,
Mhm.
you may not like be motivated to keep going, I would think.
Exactly, yeah. And I think
Yeah.
also the testing really helps. I just had a recent client case, and it also happens sometimes, right? A flare up can happen. Like it's not always healing, it's not always linear. Sometimes we make
Yeah.
really great progress. I've worked with this client of mine for 8 months. She dropped 30 pounds, got better like week after week. And then all of a sudden, I took her into her Lyme border course, and then a lot of symptoms flared. And as you know, also Lyme symptoms and mold symptoms, they can overlap. So we really had to see, okay, what is happening here? So we rerun the testing. We saw actually all her numbers are getting better or have been getting better. The mold, the parasites, the toxin burn, the heavy metals. So we knew it is a Lyme flare because the symptoms, like I said, with mold and Lyme sometimes can be overlapping. So the testing can be extremely helpful to just assess. And then, like you say, also reassure the client, because if they just all of a sudden get thrown with get hit the bump in basically and have a symptom flare up, they can be very discouraged. Like I have been working on my health now for 8 months and now I'm back to square one. So we can just show with the testing, no, you're actually not back to square one. It's just a bump in the road that you have to navigate through.
Yeah, yeah, as practitioners, we know it's like a bump in the road, but it can feel emotionally like you're back to square
Yeah.
one. And Lyme is a tough one to treat. Like I don't treat it much personally. I often refer it out and work on other systems because it is, it can you can feel bad from taking the
Mhm.
Lyme. I mean, it's tougher to manage. So good on you that you're out there doing it. Well, I know that there's a couple questions that I get a lot, which are like order of detox. I'd love to ask you about. And well, let's start with that one because people are always like, well, what do you do first? Do you open the pathways? Blah blah blah. So what's your order?
Yeah, so every person that comes to me has to do 1 month of opening drainage pathway. Some people are just so toxic, they need to do several months. I, for example, had this client of mine, Brittany, she was like bombarded with toxins. And just by doing the drainage pathways, and we extended that, and sometimes drainage pathway opening them is also not a one and done. So, first of all, what are drainage pathways? That are the natural pathways of the body that detoxify, right? We have a liver, we have a gallbladder, we have mitochondria, we have the bowels, and they naturally take out the trash from the body. Whenever we get exposed to more that they can take out, then it can accumulate in the body, and that's just really when we see like problems are occurring. So, like for example, getting back to Brittany, I had her a few months on drainage pathway opening. She had been 10 years dealing with chronic illness, and just within this 1 month she said like mysteriously lumps and bumps on her legs were disappearing, like clothes were fitting. All of a sudden she dropped over a size. She says, Shalin, my pants are falling off within 4 weeks, and I've been trying to do this. I've been on these shakes and everything. So drainage pathways play a huge role.
Wow,
Mhm. And
interesting.
also I feel like drainage is never a one and done, right? Like drainage pathways can be overwhelmed, so it's like very important to always work very close with the client and just also educate them. That's also what I'm very big on, to just show them, look, these are the signs and symptoms of a clogged liver, these are the signs and symptoms of a clogged bowel. Because if this is happening in the case that we are not working together anymore, or even like in the process, then you can also be your own best advocate and say, hey Shalin, I think my liver is clogged up, what can we do now, or what can I do now? And just learn about the body. And then I feel like
Yeah.
lately, really, I did not have any person that has not had a parasitic infection. So, like I said, I feel like the toxins are really causing these parasitic infections to spike at the moment. So, parasites is
Uh,
um, uh, in the beginning be early on treated. Then we have to have a look at the gut, and then we can also start to address mold and later on heavy metals and Lyme disease.
Okay. Yeah, I want to circle back into this more parasitic infection you're seeing, but first I want to add another question that's hotly debated, and we can just speculate, is like sort of like what came first? Like, do you feel like one thing sort of cascades everything else, or maybe a few factors happened at once? Because as we know, like mold makes you more susceptible to infection. So I'm a mold person, right? Like I feel like mold is very high
Yeah.
on the list. But I know when I started to have mold, I also was living in a lot of like emotional stress and
Mhm.
chronic stress. So I do feel like that was a factor in my illness. So yeah, just wanted to know your thoughts and observations, like either from your own life or seeing clients.
Both, I would definitely 100% agree, like on the emotional factors. And I feel like it also comes back to the immune system, right? When we are chronically stressed out, our body does not really know, is she really running from a lion? Is it like an emergency? Or just does she have randomly these thoughts like ruminating and being constantly in fight or flight? And whenever the immune system is lowered, the body just cannot fight off anything so fast. So the pathogens they are already inside us, right? And then they just are allowed to overgrow. Pathogens are also degraders. So, for example, if we are exposed to heavy metals, they are degrading that, and then they just basically can easily repopulate, they can get stronger. So, there is always a root cause there. And I feel like it's not just one root cause. That's what I've been really seeing throughout. It's like a combination, and we really have to work on everything: mind, body, spirit, lifestyle.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, by the time usually, and this is probably for your clients too, that people like are just at the end of their rope with their symptoms. They've been going on a long time. They've usually collected a few, at least a few different diagnoses in the body. I know that can be like frustrating for people, like, oh, why me? But basically, like everybody's in that same boat by the time they've been chronically ill. They're all having virus flare ups or parasites increased, and so unfortunately becomes like normal. It's a normal picture for our chronic clients. So let's talk a bit more about the parasite part, because again, people may not even know like that's so rampant. Um, why do you think it's getting more rampant, or is it just your because you're learning more about it, or do you think there's some factors in our environment making it so?
Yeah, I feel like the toxicity is increasing. So, for example, even on myself, right? Like I took a total tox burn like 1 year ago in Dubai, and my I was living back in Dubai then, and my health lifestyle, I'm always like pretty healthy. I have the 80-20 rule, right? Like I'm choosing to live to naturally be very healthy, but I also allow myself, I have a healthy balance. And I ran the total tox burn just recently again, and I'm now in the States, and all of a sudden these toxins show up, and I'm just thinking, okay, where do they come from? I don't even know where I'm getting the exposure from. So, for example, glyphosate is being sprayed in the air here.
Yeah.
We can hardly escape it. Everything is wrapped in plastic. Plastic always shows up. Heavy metal is just randomly getting exposed to, and I don't know why. And also, for example, like I said, my diet is pretty clean, and I'm having these mycotoxins that are food contaminated. And then I'm also thinking,
Huh.
where does it come from? Because I'm not eating grains, like I'm not eating corn. That's not
Wow.
part of my diet. So where do these mold toxins really come from? And here we can also dig deeper, right? First of all, for example, if we eat meat, the animals, they often get fat contaminated corn, and the corn gets stored in the fat cells, and then we basically get that mycotoxin that is basically derived from corn by eating meat, even if it's an organic choice.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. So basically, we become more toxic. So our cells are inflamed, not communicating as well. Immune system is weaker. And then the parasite is sort of feeding off some of that.
Yeah, exactly. So parasites, they feed off, in particular, of heavy metals. I see heavy metals also like very high when we run the total tox burden. And then parasites also store mold spores and Lyme spores inside them. So there's also the question, that's not like something that's scientifically proven, but if the parasite is having the mold spores inside them, does it also feed off like eating the mold or getting stronger by like in the environment of
Ugh.
mold?
Yeah. Yeah. You're in Florida, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I haven't read a lot about it, but I was reading that there are like the mosquito, like genetically modified mosquitoes
Mhm.
are being seen there, and like malaria's being introduced. And
Yeah.
then I'm sure that's going to be a big excuse for spraying for. So I don't know if you've been following that story, but I was just curious.
Yeah. No, I've not been following it, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll have to dig a little deeper because I
Mhm.
was like, whoa, because you and I learned a lot about that stuff for
Yeah.
the Cell Core
Yeah.
conference. But yeah, I mean, I saying like our clients have water filters, eat organic, and then we still see some chemicals really high that you're just like, oh, I don't know. I see a lot of gasoline additive, jet fuel
Mhm.
additive, and
Yeah.
that's pretty hard to get away from.
Yeah.
Even if you well, I live in the country or whatever, like it doesn't seem to matter. So that's pretty scary stuff. I'm definitely gonna run that test. Yeah, that's really interesting. So you mentioned earlier, like people gaining weight slowly from aging, and I know I'm going to be a little selfish and ask a question for myself. So this winter, I did a lot of parasite cleansing. I got rid of a lot of parasites,
Mhm.
but I don't know, maybe I was also being like not active enough, but I'm usually like tiny, tiny and I'm almost 49 and I've like started to gain more weight. So I'm like, is this, am I like is my body trying to make estrogen or like is this someone a little bit normal? Like I'm still normal BMI. I just kind of curious because I'm sure your clients ask too, like, is this part of aging or how do I work with like my changing body with age?
Mm-hmm. So when we take the question back to the parasites, so they are very smart, right? Their number one task is really to survive in the body, and they do this by taking you as their host, and then they hide, they steal your nutrients. So everything you eat, a certain amount goes to parasites. So a lot of people that have huge parasitic infections, they notice, okay, they don't even feel satiated even after having this large meal because the body doesn't perceive being satiated because a portion of the nutrients goes to the parasite. But again, not the calories. Then again, they act as a holding tank for these bad bacteria, the mold spores, the Lyme, the hairy metals. So they are able then to accumulate in the body in much higher levels than the body could normally tolerate. Sometimes the parasites are also active during the night, which impairs then with sleep time, with sleep quality, detox. And these are, for example, all factors that are directly associated with weight gain. Chronic gut infections, a leaky gut in turn also creates weight gain. So these are just a lot of root causes where parasites can be the major root cause, but it has a lot of downstream effects.
Okay, so maybe my parasites were helping me stay a certain weight in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's funny. I have a friend here and she's tiny, like so skinny, and she always used to joke, "Oh, I must have a parasite." So I muscle tested her for cell core and like she's got tons of
Mm-hmm.
parasites. So she's on her program now. But we'll see. But yeah, I think to me, I've been sort of just playing with the idea of like, again, I'm still normal weight.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the body is always like evolving and changing and
Mm-hmm.
trying to find its best like diet and detox. So, um, yeah, I think I just, some factors changed for me to look at, but getting rid of parasites certainly isn't a bad thing. And as you've probably seen, I love to hear some of your stories. Like, if people don't really believe the whole parasite thing, I mean, personally, I've seen many. I've seen like at least 4 or 5 types come out of me. I'm also a big coffee animal person, which makes it easier to see them. But there is a certain like visceral satisfaction and relief when you see them come out. So I wonder if you want to share anything on that.
Yeah, so definitely. So I also feel like it's very satisfactory to see like the protocol is working, but also what I see a lot when people are really passing this huge parasites, and this has also been the same in my case when I was chronically ill. I also had a huge parasitic infection. There was always kind of some announcement from the body. So it was, for example, in the afternoon I was working in the computer, and all of a sudden I randomly basically I passed out, and I was just like waking up, and then I had this huge bowel movement and this huge parasite came out. Or remember another time I was at that time during COVID, I was doing a parasite cleanse, and I was living with my mom, and I came down to the kitchen to her, and she says, "Wow, Shalin, all of a sudden your eyes, they are like almost black underneath." And then shortly afterwards, I also passed a huge parasite, and people really get this announcement. They get headaches, like numbness, tingling in the arms, and then all of a sudden they have the urge to go to the toilet, and then all
Wow.
of a sudden there's the parasite die off.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I had one like that, like the suddenly had to go to the bathroom at the gym, mind you, and I passed like a foot long parasite. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And you probably work with more clients with parasites than me, but like I am starting to collect more of the stories and see how the symptoms you wouldn't even think are from parasites.
Yeah.
That we also learned about at that conference very much can be from parasites. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, the underlying thing is our environment. I had a client recently had come family had come from Russia, and their son was really sick, and sun is really toxic. And I feel bad. It's like you come to this country and it's worse. It's not
Yeah.
healthy. And as long as we live here, we are being exposed. So I think that's why it's good to be advocates for
Yeah.
environmental change, because you say it's, well, we're blaming the parasite, But in a sense, the parasite is just, a byproduct of a
Exactly.
bigger problem. So yeah, we all have to be really conscious with it and make good choices with our food. But yeah, like you said, keep your detox pathways open. Like you should be doing something to detox every single day,
Yeah.
whether it's dry brushing or sauna or whatever, because we're all in this toxic soup, and we can't really get out of it. So.
And for me, actually, it was also like quite nice now to re-experience this, right? Like when I reran my total tox burn in Dubai after my detoxification, it was like basically very clean. And now I came
Nice.
back to the States and now all these toxins are showing up again. So it's just like also I'm learning the lesson. So, okay, you have to maintain detoxification. It's easier for me to rotate through binders, keep my drainage open, do sauna, just put in the extra effort and then just like learn, okay, this is how I can keep these things out of my body. It's like not maybe a one and done. Yeah, once you go to the major detoxification process, when you are into chronic illness, then it's harder. But I also learned now, since I have done all that, now I can jump right into the mold protocol, right? I don't have to do the drainage pathways opening. I don't have to do parasites
Yeah.
infections again. I basically can go right after what's present in my body.
Yeah, yeah, if you keep your body fairly clean, then if you travel and have a hiccup or
Yeah,
whatever, it's easier to bounce back. So that's
yeah,
for people to know. I mean, Shailene and I both were in a pretty bad state with mold and everything. And you do get to the point where you're generally maintaining health. And then if you accidentally move into a moldy place or you do this or that, like you kind of know, you get what's happening and you can make better choices and bounce
yeah,
back
yeah,
faster. So I just learned from before we came on that you're an FDN and so am I. So that's awesome.
yeah.
So you can run labs with people. Looks like you have private coaching and a group program. Do you want to tell us a little more?
Yeah, I do both. So I take on clients one-on-one, but also just a very limited container, because I feel the people that I'm working with, they are chronically ill. And they're like really bedridden. Sometimes they're really in the midst on it, and I really want to I work with those very, very closely. So they basically have 24/7, a 48 access to me, a 48-hour guaranteed response rate. They can perform as much lab testing as they want to. So this is really working with me very, very closely. It's in my program called the Breakthrough Weight Loss Formula. So we perform lab testing. I take them to the detoxification protocols, and basically there's also a 6-month program full of video modules where they learn along the way. But obviously, with any questions they have, they can come directly to me. And then also, if people say, okay, I cannot afford lab testing, because we have to be honest, lab testing is not cheap. And also
Yeah.
working one with a practitioner is not cheap. I also have a group coaching program. It's called the Root Cause Solution, where I basically created like more standardized protocol based on what I have learned, what's the right order of operations, and they can just basically perform this at a lower price point.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I've been thinking of doing something like that as well. Because I think we learn when we hear about each other's case as well.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, okay. Um, Well, her website will be here below the video, and next week, I don't know, do you know Shalene Nicole, what's her last name? Kolke or Kolke from
No.
Cellcore. She's one of the muscle testing coaches. So
Okay.
she's going to be on next week, saying on Wednesday, talking about a little bit more about pediatrics and muscle testing. So you guys are like my little dynamic duo, and then we're sharing it with our newsletter. So I just find this approach so exciting, right? And I'm just happy to be introducing, more people to it.
Yeah.
So just, always, oops, sharing the love and, trying to get people interested. So you're welcome to ask us, reach out to Shalene or me to ask questions. We're both on Instagram as well. And I just encourage you to keep learning and find your root causes and do the work. It can take a while, but
Yeah.
it's totally worth it. So thank you so much for coming on. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Maybe, yeah, just one misconception that I think is very common about mold. So many people say, okay, I have been living in mold, it's enough to get out of the mold. But 25% of the population have actually a gene that's called the HLA-DR gene, and that means they are not good at dumping the toxins. That means the toxins stay in the fat cells if you're not actively pulling them out. And then this again leads to damaged leptin receptors in the brain. This is leptin is the obesity or obesity or satiety hormone. It's produced in the fat cells, and it's supposed to really inhibit the hunger or regulate energy balance. And when these receptors get damaged, it just produces more and more leptin, which leads to more weight gain. So sometimes it's not enough to get out of the mold. I see people that are living in a clean house. They have been retesting their home. They have been exposed to mold like 3 to 5 years ago, and really the mycotoxins are still in the
Wow.
fat cells. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, in my own journey too. I mean, when I moved from Oregon to Arizona, I think I subconsciously just thought it would be like, zip, all done.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have the gene or not. I haven't tested, but what I've seen from clients, like whether or not you have the gene, like you mentioned, like the symptoms and the numbers aren't always equal. Like we all have a load to clear, and systems that have been damaged, like you're talking about the leptin, like my hormones were so tanked out, my white blood cells were so low, so my body like couldn't come back up. So yeah, I 100% agree. That's a great piece of advice. Mold is not simple. Like nothing about it is simple, and you definitely have to do the work. But I think one of the most exciting things is you can be quite sick,
Yeah.
bedridden, can't work, twitching, all these things,
Mm-hmm.
and come back to basically full health. So
100%.
that's amazing. The body that can do all that. Even the brain like has so much capacity to rejuvenate. So if you are watching this and experiencing mold or have mysterious weight gain, like I think Shalin and I both have a lot of success stories, right? Of people doing the work, doing the testing, and getting better, getting back to like basically a normal life again. So
Yeah.
that's the
And just
exciting
it's
part.
sometimes for people also not easy to really track down that it's mold, because the symptoms, we haven't really touched on the symptoms of mold. They are also so vague, right? It's again the weight gain, the inability to lose weight, but also like depression out of the blue. Who would tie depression to mold? Or coughing randomly, being chronically fatigued, weak, cellulite, brain fog. These are all things that if you hear them, people would not necessarily think, oh, that must be coming from a mold exposure. And then the people very often also think, okay, these symptoms are probably normal, right? Because it's something that's creeping up slowly, and it's like then again the part of aging. And then
Yeah.
really
Oh,
knowledgeable.
everybody's tired because we're all moms and we all work. And yeah. And for me, like my first symptoms were more like weak immunity, like catching a lot of colds, chronic pain, like food sensitivities, and literally nobody was saying this could be mold.
Yeah.
And even the weight gain, like I think there isn't much association with
Yeah.
mold. I think eventually most people will end up with brain fog and fatigue, but those aren't always the first symptoms, I find.
Yeah.
So it is tricky. So I have a free guide I can put below just to identify some of these mold symptoms. I always encourage people, just start where you are. Like if you're hearing this and it's like, oh my God, like just start to learn, just be curious, like learn a little bit more about molds, learn a little bit more about detox pathways. Just like follow your curiosity, start where you are. Don't worry about step 26. Just worry about step 1. And that's what worked for me. Is just slowly being curious and continuing. Would you agree with that, Shalene?
100%, and also always trusting your intuition, right? Symptoms are the body's way of talking to you. And even if you have seen a tense conventional doctor and he tells you your blood work is normal, there's nothing wrong with you, if you feel you are not healthy, then you are probably not healthy. And there is a way really to get you better health.
The lab tests can be tricky because there's different, is that marker inside the cell or outside the cell, and stuff like that. So yeah, well, thank you again for coming on, Shalene. Nice to reconnect with you, and I hope we stay in touch and see each other at some more conferences.
Yeah.
And again, I'll be back next week talking more about detox and what's up in our environment and a pediatric angle. So, and muscle testing if you're not familiar. So tune in for that next week, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.